Overthinking is something that many of us struggle with, and it's important to understand where it truly comes from. You see, in Islam we are taught that the mind is a powerful tool, but if left unmanaged, it can become a gateway for shaitan to influence us. When we overthink, when we replay events over and over again, when we worry about what might happen tomorrow or stress about things we cannot control, these thoughts begin to take root and grow. Shaitan thrives in this kind of uncertainty. He comes to whisper, to cause doubt, to plant fear. Allah tells us in the Quran, Satan only commands you to evil and immorality, and to say about Allah what you do not know. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:16-9. This verse is powerful. It reminds us that Shaitan's mission is to disrupt your peace, to disturb your trust in Allah, and to create confusion in your heart. When you overthink, ask yourself, who is really benefiting from this? Certainly not you. Overthinking doesn't solve problems, it magnifies them. It takes a small issue and turns it into something overwhelming. That is the exact trap of Shaitan. He makes the issue appear larger than it is, so that you begin to feel hopeless, helpless, and far from the mercy of Allah. And when that happens, you begin to spiral. This is just alarming because of the pain, anguish, and terror of Raja Dan Lo Ye Balaht. You start imagining the worst possible outcomes. You even start imagining the worst possible outcomes. You even start questioning your own worth, your own decisions. And sometimes, may Allah protect us, even your own faith. This is not how a believer is meant to live. Islam gives us peace, not panic. It gives us clarity, not confusion. Look at the way our beloved Prophet Muhammad dealt with hardship. He never sat in despair, repeating, "What if?" or "Why me?" He trusted Allah completely. He took action where he could, and where he couldn't, he left the matter to Allah. Shaitan, however, loves the what-ifs. He wants you to live in anxiety about things that have not happened yet and may never happen at all. And the more you overthink, the more distant you feel from your Lord. You may even start neglecting your prayers, your Quran, your dua, because your mind is too clouded with worry. That is precisely what Shaitan wants, to disconnect you from Allah. But Allah, in His infinite mercy, constantly calls us back. He says in the Quran, "And if an evil suggestion comes to you from Satan, then seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, He is hearing and knowing." Surah Al-Araf 7:20. This is the solution. When you find yourself stuck in thoughts that are unproductive, fearful, or repetitive, turn to Allah. Say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim." Seek protection from the one who is trying to disturb your peace. Now, does this mean we shouldn't think at all? Of course not. Islam encourages reflection, planning, and wisdom. But there's a clear difference between healthy thinking and obsessive thinking. One is a means of growth, the other is a form of emotional and spiritual harm. The moment you find yourself going beyond reflection and entering the territory of overthinking, stop, pause, make wudu, pray 2 rakahs, and talk to Allah. Pour your heart out to Him. Tell Him what's worrying you. Ask Him to ease your mind and guide your heart. You must also remind yourself that your life is in Allah's hands. You are not in control of everything, and that's okay. That's not a weakness. That's part of your servitude to Allah. Let go of the illusion that you must know how everything will turn out. Let go of the burden that you must always make the perfect choice or predict the future. That burden is not yours to carry. Allah is Al-Alim, the all-knowing. He sees the things you cannot see. He knows the wisdom behind every delay, every change, every unanswered dua. And sometimes, what feels like a disaster is actually a divine detour leading you to something better. But if your mind is constantly clouded with overthinking, you won't be able to see the beauty in Allah's plan. So, my brothers and sisters, next time your mind begins to race, when you feel overwhelmed by thoughts and what-ifs, stop and remind yourself, this is not from Allah. This is a test, and I choose to respond with trust, not with fear. I choose tawakkul over anxiety. I choose to remember Allah instead of drowning in doubt. Trust Allah and watch what happens next. You will be amazed at how peace enters your heart when you hand over your worries to the one who never sleeps, never forgets, and never fails. Trusting Allah, known as tawakkul, is not simply sitting back and doing nothing. It is not saying, I'll leave it to Allah, while making no effort to help yourself. Rather, true tawakkul in Islam is a balanced approach. It means you do everything within your power to work hard, make the right choices, plan wisely, and then you leave the outcome to Allah with complete contentment in your heart, whether it goes your way or not. This concept was taught to us beautifully by the Prophet Muhammad. He once said, if you were to rely upon Allah with the reliance He is due, you would be given provision like the birds. They go out in the morning hungry and return full. This hadith from Tirmidhi is simple but incredibly profound. Look at the birds. They don't sit in their nests waiting for food to fall from the sky. They fly out every morning, they search, they strive, but they have no idea where exactly their food will come from. Yet they trust that Allah will provide, and Allah never fails them. They return full every evening. This is the balance Islam teaches: effort plus trust. We plan, we take action, and we trust that what Allah chooses for us is better than what we would have chosen for ourselves. But unfortunately, many of us confuse tawakkul with passiveness. We either overdo it with stress and control every detail, or we do nothing and just hope for the best. Islam teaches neither. Islam teaches us to tie the camel, then trust in Allah. That's exactly what the Prophet said to a man who left his camel without tying it and said, I have put my trust in Allah. The Prophet replied, tie your camel and then put your trust in Allah. This shows us that tawakkul doesn't cancel effort, it completes it. When you've done everything within your ability, when you've studied, applied, worked, prayed, and planned, you've fulfilled your duty. At that point, worrying about the result is no longer your job. That's when tawakkul should step in. You see, when we lack tawakkul, we start to obsess. We overthink. We try to control every detail. We become frustrated when things don't go our way, and we fall into despair when our efforts don't bring immediate results. But when you truly trust Allah, you don't measure your success by outcomes. You measure it by effort and sincerity. You trust that if something didn't work out, it's because Allah has a better plan for you. You trust that even the delay is a part of His wisdom. You begin to live with peace, not pressure. Allah is Al-Wakil, the disposer of affairs. This name alone should calm your heart. It means you can assign your burdens to Him. You can delegate your concerns to Him. He knows the end from the beginning, and He has promised that whoever relies on Him, He will be enough for them. Allah says in the Quran, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Surah At-Talaq 65:3. What more assurance could we ask for? Allah is telling you directly that He is enough. You don't need to carry everything on your own shoulders. But tawakkul is a decision. It is something you must choose. It doesn't just happen on its own. You must actively remind yourself, I have done my part. Now I leave the outcome to Allah. And when you do this with sincerity, your heart will begin to settle. You'll no longer be attached to results, but to the wisdom of the one who controls those results. Even in the life of the Prophet, tawakkul was central. Think about the hijrah, the migration from Makkah to Medina. The Prophet planned in detail. He chose the right companion, Abu Bakr, arranged for a guide, chose an unconventional route, and hid in the cave of Tawakkul to avoid detection. This was strategy, preparation, and effort. But even then, when the enemies of Quraysh reached the mouth of the cave, and Abu Bakr began to fear for their lives, the Prophet turned to him and said, Do not be afraid. Indeed, Allah is with us. Surah At-Tawbah 9:40. This is tawakkul. doing everything you can, and then having full conviction that Allah is with you. That kind of mindset frees you from fear. It lifts the burden of outcomes from your chest and places it in the hands of the one who never makes mistakes. You begin to understand that Allah doesn't waste your efforts. Even if you don't see the results now, they are stored with Him. So remember, Tawakkul is not weakness, it is strength. It is the highest form of confidence, not in yourself, but in your Creator. You walk forward without knowing what the future holds, but with full trust in the one who holds the future. That's when you truly begin to live with peace, even in uncertainty. That's when your heart starts to feel light. That's when you begin to witness what Allah can do, when you let go and trust Him fully. One of the most beautiful and powerful beliefs in Islam is the understanding that our qadr, our divine destiny, is already written. Everything that happens in your life, every success, every failure, every joy and every hardship, has already been decreed by Allah long before you were even created. This belief is not meant to scare us or make us passive. Rather, it's meant to bring a deep sense of peace, contentment, and trust in the one who knows what we do not. The Prophet Muhammad told us that Allah wrote the destiny of all creation 50,000 years before the creation of the heavens and the earth. This is found in a hadith in Sahih Muslim. Reflect on that for a moment. Before you ever existed, before your parents or grandparents walked the earth, before the mountains, rivers, and oceans were formed, your story was already written by the one who knows all things. Allah, in His perfect knowledge, knew every moment of your life. He knew what you would go through, the decisions you would make, the challenges you would face, and how you would respond to each one. So when we begin to overthink, when we become paralyzed with fear about the future, we must remind ourselves that we are not in control of everything. We were never meant to be. Yes, we are responsible for our choices and our efforts, but the results and outcomes are not in our hands. They are with Allah. And since He is Al-Alim, the all-knowing, and Al-Hakim, the most wise, we can trust that whatever He has written for us is not random, and it is not without purpose. Often, we overthink because we feel that we must control every detail. We worry about what might happen if things don't go the way we expect. We replay past mistakes and try to change the outcome in our minds. But what we forget is that the outcome was never in our hands to begin with. Yes, you might have made a mistake, but even that was part of the journey that Allah had written for you. Perhaps through that mistake, you learned something invaluable. Perhaps through that delay, Allah protected you from a greater harm. Perhaps through that disappointment, He redirected you to something far better. Understanding qadr doesn't mean we stop striving. Islam does not encourage fatalism. We are commanded to take action, to plan, to make dua, and to work hard. But once all of that is done, we submit to the will of Allah. That submission brings peace. You begin to realize that you do not need to carry the burden of trying to control every outcome. You can make peace with what was and stop torturing yourself with what could have been. Allah says in the Quran, "No disaster strikes except by permission of Allah, and whoever believes in Allah, He will guide his heart, and Allah is knowing of all things." Surah At-Tahabun 64:11. This verse is so comforting. It teaches us that when a difficulty strikes and you respond with faith, Allah Himself will guide your heart. That means He will settle your heart, give you clarity, and allow you to move forward with strength. The companions of the Prophet believed in Khidr so deeply that they faced the most difficult trials with amazing resilience. They knew that what had missed them was never meant to reach them, and what had reached them was never going to miss them. This mindset gave them courage. They did not waste time drowning in regrets or overthinking the past. Instead, they focused on the present, trusting that whatever came their way was part of Allah's perfect plan. It's also important to understand that qadr includes both good and bad from our perspective. We must accept the sweet and the bitter as coming from Allah. That doesn't mean we enjoy hardship, but it means we accept that even the hardship serves a purpose. It may be a means of purification, elevation, or redirection. Sometimes, the very thing we were trying to avoid becomes the path to our greatest growth. So when you feel overwhelmed by life's uncertainties, when your mind won't stop racing with all the what ifs, remember this: your life is already written by the one who loves you more than anyone else ever could. He does not make mistakes, he is not careless. He knows what your heart needs even when you don't. And no matter how things unfold, nothing escapes his knowledge, his wisdom, or his mercy. Instead of exhausting yourself with endless overthinking, embrace the calm that comes with trusting in Qada. Say, "This was always meant to be," and then move forward with strength. Because the believer doesn't dwell in the past or fear the future. The believer understands that every moment is part of a story written by the most merciful, and in that story, nothing is wasted and everything has a purpose. The human heart is constantly in search of peace. In today's world, we are surrounded by distractions, stress, and a never-ending stream of information. It is easy to feel anxious, unsettled, and lost. People turn to many things for comfort: entertainment, conversations, scrolling endlessly on social media, or even unhealthy habits. But the real peace, the deep and lasting tranquility that fills the heart with light and certainty, can only come from one source: the remembrance of Allah. Allah Himself tells us in the Quran, "Verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." Surah Ar-Ard 13:28. This verse is not just a beautiful phrase, it is a divine prescription for healing the human soul. The more we distance ourselves from Allah, the more our hearts begin to feel empty. When we forget to remember Allah, we open the door for all kinds of negative feelings: worry, sadness, confusion, and overthinking. But when we engage in dhikr, when we remember Him with our hearts and our tongues, a calmness descends that cannot be explained in words. It is something you feel deeply within. A type of peace that money cannot buy, that achievements cannot produce, and that no human being can give you. What exactly is dhikr? It is not just repeating phrases with our lips. True dhikr involves the heart. It means being conscious of Allah, remembering His greatness, His mercy, His knowledge, and His power over every situation. When you say Subhanallah, you are declaring that Allah is free from all imperfections. When you say Alhamdulillah, you are expressing gratitude for all the blessings you have, big or small. When you say Allahu Akbar, you are reminding yourself that no matter how big your problem is, Allah is greater. When you say La ilaha illa Allah, you are reaffirming your purpose and realigning your heart with the one who created it. The Prophet Muhammad used to engage in dhikr constantly. His tongue was always moist with the remembrance of Allah in every situation: before sleeping, upon waking, before eating, after eating, when entering the home, when leaving, even during moments of fear or grief. There was a remembrance that connected him to Allah. He taught his companions to do the same, and this habit strengthened their hearts to face the most difficult tests with calmness and certainty. When a person gets stuck in overthinking, it is often because their mind is disconnected from their heart. They begin to drown in endless thoughts, most of which are outside their control. Shaitan takes advantage of this, whispering negative ideas, exaggerating worries, and pushing the person deeper into anxiety. But dhikr acts like a shield. It blocks these whispers and replaces them with clarity. When you say, Hasbun Allahu wa ni'mal wakil, Allah is sufficient for us and He is the best disposer of affairs, you are not just reciting a phrase, you are shifting your trust from your limited self to the unlimited power of Allah. There is a reason why Allah told Prophet Moses, to remember Him constantly when facing Pharaoh. Allah said, "Go you and your brother with my signs and do not slacken in my remembrance." Surah Taha 20:42. Why? Because remembrance strengthens the soul. It is a spiritual armor. The more you remember Allah, the less space there is for doubt and worry to live in your heart. Even in times of great fear or uncertainty, Dhikr can transform the experience. The Prophet taught us that the remembrance of Allah is like a fortress. In one hadith, he said, "The example of the one who remembers his Lord and the one who does not is like the living and the dead." Bukhari. This is a powerful image. When you stop remembering Allah, your heart begins to die. But with dhikr, you feel spiritually alive, energized and centered. One of the most beautiful things about dhikr is that it can be done anywhere, anytime. You don't need a special setting. You could be walking, cooking, driving, or lying in bed and still be remembering Allah. And the impact it has on your mental and emotional well-being is extraordinary. You begin to see your problems differently. You stop magnifying the things that are stressing you, and you start magnifying Allah instead. Your heart starts to soften, your mind starts to clear, you feel more grounded, more hopeful, and more focused. So whenever you find yourself overthinking, caught up in endless thoughts, and struggling to find peace, pause. Don't try to fight your thoughts with more thoughts. Instead, bring your heart into the moment. Say, Astaghfirullah. Say, Ya Allah, help me. La Allah. Say, La Allah, La Allah billah. The power of these simple phrases is immense. They pull you out of your head and into the presence of the one who controls all things. And once you truly begin to live with that awareness, you will experience the kind of peace that nothing else in this world can offer. When you begin to place your trust in Allah sincerely, when you stop overthinking and hand your affairs over to Him, amazing things start to happen in your life. It's not just about finding peace in your heart, though that in itself is a great gift, but it's also about seeing real, tangible changes in your life. Allah opens doors you never imagined. He places barakah in your time, your health, your relationships, your efforts. You begin to notice that things just start falling into place, not because you figured everything out, but because you stopped trying to control everything and instead relied on the one who already has everything under control. Many times, we are our own barrier to progress. We hold ourselves back with doubt, fear, and anxiety. We overthink every decision, every move, every step. We imagine failure before we even begin. But when we learn to take a step back, breathe, and trust Allah, He guides us in ways that are subtle yet profound. Allah says in the Quran, "And whoever fears Allah, He will make a way out for him and provide for him from where he does not expect." Surah At-Talaq 65:3. This is not a metaphor, it's a promise. When you put your trust in Him, when you do your part and then rely on Him, He intervenes in ways that are beyond your understanding. Think of how many times you thought something wouldn't work out, but it did. How many times were you stressed about something only to realize later that it turned out better than you expected? How many times were you denied something you desperately wanted only to be given something better in return? These are signs of Allah's mercy and His perfect plan for you. When you learn to stop overthinking and simply say, "Ya Allah, I trust you," you begin to live in a different way. You stop fighting life and start flowing with the qadr of Allah. One of the signs that you truly trust Allah is that you begin to accept outcomes with grace. You no longer react with frustration or bitterness when things don't go your way. Instead, you say, "Maybe this wasn't good for me. Maybe Allah is protecting me from something I can't see." And the more you think like this, the more peace you feel. You start recognizing that Allah's plan is always better, even when it's not easy. You stop demanding answers and start embracing faith. You stop chasing control and start resting in submission. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Amazing is the affair of the believer. Verily, all of his affairs are good. If something good happens, he is grateful, and that is good for him. If something bad happens, he is patient, and that is good for him." This hadith shows the mindset of a believer. Whether life brings ease or difficulty, the believer sees goodness in all of it because he knows that Allah is in charge, and Allah never wrongs anyone. When you start trusting Allah deeply, you also become more courageous. You're no longer paralyzed by fear of the unknown. You stop overthinking every decision. You start moving with confidence, not because you're sure of your own strength, but because you're sure of Allah's help. You begin to say, I don't know what's ahead, but I know Allah will be with me. And this attitude allows you to take bold steps, to grow, to serve, and to live a more meaningful life. Another beautiful thing that happens when you trust Allah is that you begin to receive clarity. Your mind becomes less clouded. Your decisions become easier. You start seeing things for what they really are. When you trust in Allah, you're no longer swayed by every emotion or every opinion around you. You're anchored in something greater. Allah begins to place light in your heart. So many people live their lives stuck in fear, afraid to try, afraid to fail, afraid to lose. But the believer rises above that by trusting in the most merciful. When you truly let go of the need to control everything, when you stop overanalyzing the future and regretting the past, when you just submit your heart to Allah and say, you know best, and I trust you, that's when transformation happens. That's when your heart begins to heal. That's when you begin to see blessings in places you weren't even looking. Trusting Allah doesn't mean life will